I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. Same-sex marriage has passed the Assembly and moves over to the Senate. But the National Organization for Marriage says it ain't over till the last senator says, I do.
This legislation was rejected when Democrats controlled the Senate. It's amazing that we're even having to spend time on this when New York has so many other urgent problems.
Plus, expectant mother care crisis pregnancy center sues New York City for censorship.
I really believe that this doesn't hinge on whether you're pro-life or pro-abortion, but about protecting the First Amendment.
And traditional marriage is on the ropes in New York. Will Senate Republicans land the final blow? Well, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. We are on the verge of a pinnacle moment for this state. Those were the words of Governor Andrew Cuomo after the New York State Assembly passed the same-sex marriage bill known as the Marriage Equality Act late last night by a vote of 80 to 63. The bill now looks likely to face a vote in the state Senate, and if it passes, New York will make history as the sixth and largest state thus far to legalize same-sex marriage. It would also be the first time in all of the state-by-state challenges to same-sex marriage, to legalize same-sex marriage, that a legislative body led by Republicans would have passed the bill to grant marriage licenses to same-sex couples. So with the momentum growing and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle changing their minds on the issue, even to their own political peril, why are there still Senate votes in limbo? Well, one possible reason is carve-outs for religious institutions. Senator Greg Ball, a notable Republican holdout in Governor Cuomo's last-minute drive to pass this controversial measure, contends that the bill's current religious exemptions are not enough to protect religious institutions from lawsuits. To explain those exemptions and exactly what the bill gets right and what it gets wrong, I'm joined now on the phone by a professor of law at Washington and Lee University, Robin Wilson. Robin, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Appreciate it very much. Now, you wrote a letter to Senator Ball about religious liberty implications of the bill of the Marriage Equality Act. First of all, I just wanted to ask you why write the letter and why did you write it to Senator Ball in particular?
Well, I should tell you, I wrote to the people who seem to care deeply about this issue still. And were undecided and identified in earlier reporting as undecided. So that's why Senator Ball. But last night I sent the letter to everybody in the Senate, so we weren't exclusive by any means. Okay. The reason I wrote the letter is it's a follow-up to a letter that a group of religious liberty scholars and I have been doing around the country, not only in New York, but in Maryland and Connecticut and New Hampshire, which have same-sex marriage laws, in which we've urged them to adopt religious liberty protections if they're going to recognize same-sex marriage. And I was pleased to see that Governor Cuomo actually heard some of what we said in our May 17th letter to him. And I have to say that the bill that he put forth vastly improved what was in place versus 2009, which, as you know, was a failed attempt at recognizing same-sex marriage in New York.
Sure. And a lot of lawmakers this time around, before the bill was introduced, said if it's the same bill as it was in 2009, they were just going to kind of write it off to begin with because of that very fact. In this new bill, in the Marriage Equality Act of 2011, what is good and what is bad as far as religious exemptions go?
Yeah, well, it definitely is an improvement over the 2009 bill. That bill basically provided exemptions from clergy from having to officiate at same-sex marriages, which is really sort of silly on its face because the First Amendment already provides that protection to clergy. So it's really no protection at all to give people something they already have. What Cuomo does in this bill that I think is admirable is he says that benevolent groups, benevolent organizations like the Knights of Columbus, religious organizations, and educational institutions will be exempt from having to provide, and then there's this language, accommodations, advantages, facilities, or privileges for purposes of solemnizing or celebrating a same-sex marriage. Now, that sounds like a lot of dense legal terms, but what it means is, let's say I'm a church and I have a basement facility that some folks in the church have used to have their wedding reception at. And this is a church that, as a matter of religious doctrine, doesn't recognize same-sex marriage. Or I'm a church-affiliated organization even that has a facility like that. This is basically saying if celebrating this particular marriage is not consistent with your own religious beliefs, you can step aside from that without opening yourself up to litigation under New York's Human Rights Act, which is a public accommodation law. And those laws were there, put in place, well-intentioned in the 50s and the 60s to make sure that people weren't treated differently based on race or gender, for that matter, or all kinds of illegitimate characteristics. But when same-sex marriage gets recognized, it drops into that legal substrate. And when those laws were passed, no one in a million years ever thought that there would be something like same-sex marriage, so they didn't think through what it would mean to have same-sex marriage together with this existing anti-discrimination statute.
Well, how would you respond to someone who might say that the religious exemptions in this bill or any religious exemptions in a bill of this nature are maybe just a thinly veiled attempt to legislate discrimination into law, under the cover of faith?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because if you go back and you look at the New York Human Rights Act, it already has exemptions for religious organizations. In fact, the specific language that the governor picks up is from an existing exemption in the Human Rights Statute. So it's hard to say, wow, this is, allowing discrimination, when the original discrimination statutes themselves recognized that they were balancing two things, both religious belief and the impact on religious organizations with what were profound recognition of equality and dignity of people. But there are two things at play here, not just one. So I think the answer is we've done that from the beginning. And we've also had individual exemptions, which I've been standing up for. So, for example, I've been saying that we need to protect the baker or the seamstress or the B&B owner who, for religious reasons, can't, as a part of their faith, celebrate that same-sex marriage. And those exemptions for individuals, that recognition that there can be a significant restraint on their liberty by trying to have statutes that are moving us forward as a country and a community, they from the beginning recognized that there were two things at play.
Sure, so not exactly an unprecedented thing. Well, Robin, we're just out of time, but Robin Wilson, professor of law at Washington and Lee University, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it today.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Well, stay tuned. The National Organization for Marriage puts their money where their mouth is on the topic of same-sex marriage next. Welcome back. Well, one organization that has a very vested interest in what happens to marriage in New York State is the National Organization for Marriage. Back in May, the group announced it would pour $500,000 into an ad campaign opposing same-sex marriage in the state. NOM also pledged to spend $1 million in the 2012 elections to support a Democratic state legislator who would cast their vote to defend traditional marriage if same-sex marriage legislation ever came to a vote. Well, with New York State on the verge and just one vote shy of becoming the 6th state in the country to grant marriage licenses to same-sex couples, NOM admittedly has its work cut out for it. But despite the seemingly high hurdles the organization has to jump, its leaders continue to hope for a turning of the tide. Well, to learn what NOM is still doing to resist same-sex marriage as the clock ticks, yesterday I sat down with Maggie Gallagher, who is the co-founder of the National Organization for Marriage. Maggie, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
A pleasure.
Well, first of all, for our viewers that might not be as familiar with the National Organization for Marriage as you would, of course, like them to be, give us maybe just the very brief Reader's Digest version of what your organization is.
Our mission is fighting to protect marriage and the faith communities that sustain it. We're the largest, in fact, the only single-issue organization fighting both at the state and the national level to protect marriage. The Washington Post called us the preeminent national organization. I like to say that's our official mission statement, but I like to say we fight gay marriage and win.
Well, there you go. And you've been, of course, attempting to do that here in New York State.
We were very involved in 2009. We helped beat back gay marriage bills in the bluest states in the nation, in Maryland and Rhode Island this spring. And right now, it's, as you know, it's D-Day for marriage here in New York, and we're going full cylinders, reaching out to voters, letting them know what the politicians in Albany are up to, and asking them to call their senators. Speak now. We've got 24 hours to stop this thing, and it is winnable. It's not a done deal.
Sure. And has the organization been doing the lobbying efforts and things like that in Albany as well, speaking directly to lawmakers?
We haven't done a lot of that. I mean, what we mainly do is reach out to voters and get them to call, because we think that's the only thing that's going to stop this. I really do think, I think that marriage is unique for a reason. It's important to protect marriage. This bill will not protect the religious organizations or individuals or small businesses from a flood of litigation. It won't protect parents' rights to what their children are taught in public schools about marriage. So there's a lot of problems with this bill. But in addition, it's a really bad idea for the Republican majority in the Senate to be doing Mayor Bloomberg and Andrew Cuomo's bidding on this. I think it's going to be a political disaster for the Republican Party in New York. That's their lookout, right? I think they should do the right thing on principle, but I just think realistically a vote for gay marriage that the Republicans will be responsible for, because they control the chamber, is not going to be good for them.
Right. And a lot of people have said it might be, sort of political suicide for a lot of people who are, and especially those who have, kind of here at the last moment changed their minds on the issue. Losing Conservative Party support in the state of New York.
Yeah, Mike Long's leadership has been huge. There was a group of pastors just yesterday on the steps of City Hall who are generating thousands of calls. And one of the guys who stood with them was David Tyree, the NFL giant. I just came from interviewing, actually. He's a fabulous man. There's a real outpouring here, as we've seen in other states. And NAM has promised to spend $1 million to go after all of the GOP senators who vote for gay marriage. We think it's wrong, and we think that they will regret it if they do.
Sure. You spoke about possible implications and fears about what this legislation would mean if it's passed and signed into law in the state of New York. Aside from that, why is New York here and now such a critical time and place for you to be doing the work that you're doing?
Listen, passing gay marriage is not high on the priority list of anyone but a small number of politicians and the base of the Democratic Party. I mean, it's amazing that after 2 years ago this legislation was rejected when Democrats controlled the Senate. It's amazing that we're even having to spend time on this when New York has so many other urgent problems. And I don't think that there is any, marriage is unique and special for a reason. It's based on the natural family. There's nothing discriminatory about it. There's no right to redefine marriage, especially without a vote of the people. I think Archbishop Dolan had a wonderful statement on this, many wonderful statements, but one of them was, he said, I think God settled the question of what marriage is a long time ago, and it's really not up to Albany to redefine it. I don't think Albany polls have the standing to redefine marriage, morally speaking.
If it does pass, and if it is signed into law, what does NAM do at that point?
Well, I think we'll do the same thing that we're doing in New Hampshire, where they passed a gay marriage bill. They rammed it through without a vote of the people. And we helped elect a whole new House and Senate. And we believe that they're going to vote later this year to repeal same-sex marriage. So that's our full intention. We really don't believe this is the priority of the people of New York, and I think that we are going to stand here for the rights of parents, for the rights of people who think to make a marriage you need a husband and wife, and we're not going to give up on this fight.
All right, well, Maggie Gallagher with the National Organization for Marriage, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, stay with us. Hockey fans go wild in Vancouver, but unfortunately it was not in the stadium. We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in just a bit, the founder of a pro-life pregnancy center prays as a judge decides on the future of his organization. But first, let's have a look at today's headlines. A stunning fall from grace today for the now scandal-scarred congressman from Queens, Anthony Weiner. He announced his resignation from Congress at the Senior Center in Brooklyn, where he first launched his political career.
I had hoped to be able to continue the work that the citizens of my district elected me to do, to fight for the middle class and those struggling to make it. Unfortunately, the distraction that I have created has made that impossible. So today I am announcing my resignation from Congress.
Weiner had served 6 full terms in Congress and was long considered a frontrunner in the 2013 mayoral race before the public learned that he had been carrying on online affairs with a variety of women. Well, a Super Bowl giant is one of the latest stars to lend his voice to the opposition to legalize same-sex marriage. David Tyree, best known for his game-saving catch in Super Bowl 42 against the New England Patriots, has recorded a video message for the National Organization for Marriage. In it, he talks about his faith and his beliefs about marriage and why he thinks the law to legalize same-sex marriage is a bad idea.
And it's not about, establishing a theocracy. It's about what's right. It's about, how can marriage be marriage for thousands of years, and now all of a sudden, because a minority, an influential minority, has a push or an agenda, and totally reshape something that was not founded in our country.
At least one other New York sports star has spoken out on the issue. New York Rangers forward Sean Avery, who supports legalizing same-sex marriage. Well, meanwhile, U.S. bishops have released their own video on marriage. It is posted on the website of the Bishops' Subcommittee for the Promotion and Defense of Marriage. In the video, couples talk about the gift of children and the importance of having a mother and a father.
Children need a father and a mother.
And have a right to them.
And have a right.
Only a mother and a father can give a child what they need.
The couples also discuss what it means to be open to life. We posted a link to that video over on our Twitter feed. Log on to Twitter and search for Currents NY. Well, bishops from all over the country are holding their spring General Assembly in Seattle, Washington. Today, they approved changes to the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People, which is a set of procedures for dealing with allegations of the sexual abuse of minors. Among the changes are including child pornography as equal to child abuse and citing the need to protect mentally disabled people from abuse. Bishop Blaise Supich, who chairs the Bishops' Committee on Protecting Children and Young People, says that the charter has been successful. He told reporters yesterday that problems occur when the charter is not followed. The bishops also approved a statement on physician-assisted suicide. Well, meanwhile, another sports championship has been decided, and that means another bishop's wager has been decided as well. The Boston Bruins took the deciding Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. They handily defeated the Vancouver Canucks by a score of 4-0. According to the friendly wager between the bishops of the two cities, Vancouver Archbishop Michael Miller is donating $100 that is, to Catholic Charities of Boston. Well, meanwhile, the scene was less than friendly on the streets of Vancouver after the game. Upset fans rioting after their team failed to take home the championship, flipping cars, setting fires, and looting. 150 people were treated for injuries. Close to 100 were arrested. Vancouver's mayor says the riot was incited by, quote, organized hoodlums bent on creating chaos. Well, back here in this country, legislators in North Carolina have become the latest to ban Planned Parenthood from receiving federal funds. As part of the state's budget, the North Carolina legislature approved a measure to remove the more than $400,000 in federal funding that Planned Parenthood receives there. The governor vetoed the budget, but the legislature overrode the veto. Less than 2 weeks ago, Planned Parenthood of Indiana sued their state over a similar measure. That case is ongoing. Well, turning now to Washington, the Supreme Court has declined to review a prominent case involving the Pledge of Allegiance. Lawyer Michael Newdow has continuously sued to have the words "under God" removed from the pledge. His latest suit was brought on behalf of a New Hampshire family. The Supreme Court declined to hear that case without giving a reason. Newdow says he's not giving up and plans on filing one or more lawsuits this year. Well, patriotism is also at the center of a controversy involving a Mennonite school in Indiana. Goshen College has announced that it will not play the Star-Spangled Banner at the start of its sporting events. Some Mennonites had criticized the national anthem, saying some of its words glorified war and went against the school's pacifist tradition. And speaking of war, a new Facebook game called Vatican Wars allows users to elect a new virtual pope. Vatican Wars allows users to join the Templars' socially conservative team or the Crusaders' socially liberal team. The teams fight over the issues of abortion, same-sex marriage, priestly celibacy, birth control, and women's ordination. According to an online tutorial for the game, it gives players the chance to decide what they think Jesus would say on the issues if he were here today. Each team tries to get one of their players elected pope. See, you too can be pope, even if it's just on Facebook, I guess. Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents ahead. When we return, a crisis is on the horizon for crisis pregnancy centers in New York.
The judge has about 3 weeks to make a decision, and he'll make it when he makes it.
Well, finally tonight, traditional marriage is not the only hot-button topic in New York that lately finds itself facing heavy-duty legal challenges. Pro-life pregnancy centers in New York say they are fighting for their very existence since the New York City Council voted to pass a bill back in March that would change the way they do business. It's known as Bill 371, and it would, among other things, require centers to put up signs indicating they do not make referrals to abortions or provide artificial contraception. Well, Chris Slattery, the founder of Expectant Mother Care EMC Frontline Pregnancy Centers, is a man caught in the eye of the storm in this brewing crisis. EMC operates over half of the 23 pro-life pregnancy centers in New York City. But despite being on the losing end of the vote in the city council, Slattery says he's determined to keep on fighting for life. And yesterday, he took his fight to Southern District Court in Manhattan. Wednesday was a day Chris Slattery and his staff at EMC pregnancy centers had been waiting for months.
I'm very optimistic about this hearing on the motions for a preliminary injunction by our attorneys. I have a feeling the judge is going to rule in our favor.
Slattery and his group are fighting what they see as an unjust law. The New York City Council passed Bill 371 in March. The legislation requires crisis pregnancy centers like EMC to post signs on their facilities telling women that they do not provide abortion or contraception or make referrals to those services. The bill calls for similar requirements in advertising. During debate on the bill, supporters described it this way.
There's been a lot of studies, including by Congressman Waxman, NARAL did the study here in New York, that women are misled by the scope of services provided by some of the limited service pregnancy centers. So the importance of having this consumer protection law is just so that when women come in, they understand what services are available and what are not available. But
Slattery said he saw the truth in advertising argument as nothing more than a front for the bill's true goal.
They're not going to be happy unless we're shut down. They put a call out to bring women in to shut us down.
But supporters of Bill 371 said that was not the case.
We do not want to put these centers out of business. We hope they continue to exist, and they are free to tell women whatever it is that they want. Under the First Amendment, they have that right. But they shouldn't do it under the guise of pretending that they're medical providers when they're not.
City Council Speaker Christine Quinn expressed similar views at a rally in support of Planned Parenthood in February.
Crisis pregnancy centers have every right to exist, but they have to be honest about what they are. If they're not a medical facility, they just need to tell women that, and they need to stop representing themselves as medical facilities when they are not.
Slattery and dozens of his supporters protested the city council when they voted on the bill in March. When it passed by an overwhelming margin, Slattery said he would file suit to stop it.
We got beat bad. We got whipped today. But we're going to get up off the canvas and keep fighting, because you never give up on the fight for life. Never.
So Wednesday, Slattery and his lawyers took their case to court in Manhattan, asking a judge for a temporary injunction to block the law from taking effect on July 14th.
I really believe that this doesn't hinge on whether you're pro-life or pro-abortion, but about protecting the First Amendment. We believe that this really isn't an issue of, consumer protection law that is going after deception, because they don't have any proof that any deception actually occurs.
And after experiencing past defeats, Heil and Slattery seem to feel optimistic about the future.
The judge has about 3 weeks to make a decision, and he'll make it when he makes it. Nobody knows the time nor the hour, but he gave the city a very hard time, I felt, and seemed to lean on our side.
Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. Now, with only 2 days left before the end of Albany's legislative session, we will definitely have much more on the countdown to the same-sex marriage vote, the possible vote, coming up on tomorrow's show. Until then, though, be sure to visit us online over at currentsny.net. You can also check us out on Facebook and on Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great night.